I'm Steve Judge, and welcome to Songkla Rajapat MOOC English for the Workplace seminar. This is discussing jobs and work for the workplace. Today, I want to introduce some common phrases used to describe jobs and show how they are used with some common jobs. So, talking about jobs, we learn in English, you learn very simple phrases to describe what a job is. So if I asked you, what does a salesperson do? Can you tell me what their job? And a very simple answer is they sell things. For younger and early English students, that's a good answer. But as you become more advanced, you need to be able to give a more detailed answer. So if you look at this slide, you can say a salesperson's job is much more than just they sell things. So if we want to describe a salesperson's job is safe, a salesperson works inside or in an office or outside. A salesperson works with people. They might work for a company or work by themselves. A salesperson has special skills. Salesperson works with money. A salesperson wears a suit. There's a lot of different phrases we can use to talk about a salesperson and their job than just that they sell people. So let's look at some commonly used phrases that are used to talk about jobs, and then we'll go into examples. So first we have my job is, or the negative my job isn't. So first, my job is dangerous or safe. So the chance of getting hurt. My job is creative. My job is repetitive. Or the opposite, my job is unpredictable. And last, my job is stressful. We also have I work. So I work alone, I work in a team, I work in a place, or I work from home, I work outside, I work regular hours, or I work at night, I work a rotating shift, I work long or short hours, I work full-time, or I work part-time, or I work for a company, or I work for the government. We also use I have. So I have a university degree, I have special training, or I have a special skill. I work with, and examples are I work with people, I work with money, food, equipment or tools, I work with animals, or I work with medicine. And those we have just unique verb phrases. So I wear, so your clothes. I wear a uniform. I wear a suit. I wear protective clothes. I sell or I make things. I use equipment. I complete or do paperwork. I manage people, or I earn a commission. And the individual verb phrases that are used a lot when talking about jobs. So let's go over individually. So our first is my job is, and repetitive or unpredictable. Now repetitive means that you do the same action again and again and again every day. So An accountant's job, for example, can be very repetitive because their job is to put data into a computer and balance the books. A factory worker's job can be repetitive because they can work at the same machine and make the same product every single day. An unpredictable job means maybe they have a different task every day, or something different can happen every day. So a journalist, their job is to ask people questions, but every day they'll talk to different people and ask different questions. So they don't know what every day is going to look like. Uh, an actor can have an unpredictable job. One day they're in a scene and making a romantic movie, and the next day they're in an action scene and they have to fight 100 bad guys. So their job can be different from day to day. Next, using my job is and being creative. What makes a job creative is whether or not a person has to make something, something new, or make it special, or sometimes they have to do problem solving and find a way to solve a problem. So, example, like an artist has to make something brand new. They'll make a painting, or let's say a musician makes a new song, but a DJ will make two songs and combine them together to make a new sound, and that's creative in its own way. A teacher has to find ways to inspire students and make them interested and want to learn. So they have to have a unique problem solving skill that's very creative for their department. An accountant, for example, their job it's usually facts and figures, and it's putting them in the right category and shouldn't be considered a creative job in the most. When we talk about my job is or isn't stressful, stressful is different for different people, and people find different things stressful because people are afraid of different things. So what makes a job stressful is making important decisions. For example, if you're the CEO of a company and it's your job to choose the future of your company, and you have to make it a decision that impacts many people's lives, you might be stressed about that. Some people have to manage people like human resources, and some people have better people skills and find managing people to be stressful. Other people are great with it. Handling money is also a stressful thing for other people. Making sure the money's accountable, that you meet people's expectations. People find money very stressful. A lot of jobs have deadlines where you have to finish a report or do a presentation, and people find meeting just deadlines, saying a time, can be stressful. Other jobs like a police officer or a soldier, where your personal safety is in danger, that can also be stressful. So it's very individual, but how we express it is saying my job is or my job isn't stressful. And all depends on how you feel about that, about those different categories or tasks during a job. So those are all my job is. Let's look at with I work. Now, I work often talks about where you work, when you work, and who you work with. So we have our simple I work where, I work when, and I work who. So I work where, we often say I work in a, so we have buildings. I work in a school, I work in a hospital, I work in a restaurant and store. So if you're a teacher, you say I work in a school. If you're a cook, I work in a restaurant. If you're a cashier, you'd say I work in a store. I work, we often use I work in an office. Now, it could be for many companies, but people who work in office are secretaries, engineers, and accountants. I work at, and then we're more specific buildings like government buildings or names. So I work in a police station if you're a policeman. I work in a fire station if you're a firefighter. Government buildings, so if I work, a government officer, I work in the immigration office, and you're an immigration officer. It can also be a specific name, so example, I work at Rajabhat University. And so those we use, so it's in or in an, or I work at. We also use outside, so also called outdoors. So an athlete will work outside, so they maybe work at a stadium. Farmer, delivery person. These are all jobs that are typically outdoors and not in a building. We also have when you work. So we have regular hours. So that's your Western 9 to 5. Sometimes it's 8 to 4, but it's during the day, so morning and afternoon. We also have I work at night, so more in the evening after 5 o'clock. And we also talk about rotating shifts. Some jobs ask you to work during the day 1 week and then working at night at the next week. And we call those rotating shifts. So example of regular hours, we have accountants and teachers. At night, common, like you'll go to a restaurant for dinner, so bartender and waiter. But waiters and waitresses also work during the day too. You can go for lunch, so they might be on a rotating shift. So they can work daytime and nighttime, depending on the day and on the week. We also talk about long hours versus short hours. I work long hours. So if you work 9 or more hours in a shift, you would describe your work as I work long hours. If you work 6 hours or less, you would say I work short hours. Now we also say I work full-time or I work part-time. Full-time is if you work 40 hours or more a week. Part-time is you work 25 hours or less during a week. An example for full-time is an office worker or a teacher. Part-time would be like a waiter or a bartender, where they're just 25 hours a week. We have I work alone or in a team. So we have examples: designers, DJs, taxi drivers, salesperson. And a salesperson can be part of a sales team, but usually when they meet a customer, they're alone and they're one-on-one. Versus where you work in a team, you are part of you have one specific job and everybody in that team. So there's soldiers, football players, a musician in a band. Everyone has a responsibility in their team. We also use I work for a private company or I work for the government. Now, private company is any business that is not the government. So if you work for Google, if you work for, if you work for SCB, any company that is not directly the government, you would say I work for a private company. So jobs that are common in a private company are accountant, salesperson, office worker, factory. Government jobs are often government officers, soldiers, politicians, policemen. Even in government schools, you could be a teacher and be working for the government. So it either directly is whether it's a government or not a government company. Next, we have our phrase, I have. And it talks about your qualifications or the importance for your job. So we have, I have a university degree. There are certain jobs that you can't do without having a university degree. So example, a doctor, a lab technician, or a teacher. There are certain jobs you can't do if you don't have special training. So I have special training. Example, I have sales training, and you know how to sell to people. So a business person, a soldier, IT specialist, flight attendant, those all have special training on the job. Or there are jobs that you have special skills and that you might have individually before even doing the job. So example, I have a chef, knows how to cook specific food. A painter knows how to paint. An athlete can play a sport really well. A butcher knows how to wield a knife. A carpenter knows how to work with wood. And those are special skills someone has after years of working in that field. So yeah, we describe with qualifications about doing the job. We also say I work with, and there's two ways. We use I work with things that you use during while you're doing the job, or things that you interact with doing the job. So example, we have I work with equipment or tools, so you use tools, or I work with computers or technology, or I work with social media. Or maybe it's just that you interact with those when you're doing. So I work with people, money, food, animals, or medicine. So example, a mechanic or a lab technician, they work with a tools. So a mechanic's job is to fix something, and they use tools to fix. I work with computers and social media to, if you're a social influencer, so or if you're a government officer. So next we have I work with, and there's two ways we use I work with. We use them with things that you use, or things that you interact with when you do your job. The idea is things you use are, you have to use them to complete your job, and things you interact with are just maybe something that you have to handle during the job. So let's look at examples. So things that you use. So equipment, tools, or instruments. So a mechanic's job is to fix cars. So they interact with cars, but they'll use tools to fix the car. A lab technician maybe to do tests, but they will use instruments to do. So I work with tools or I work with instruments are phrases you would use to describe these kind of jobs. Also, maybe you're a social media influencer and you use a computer or social media to do your job. If you're a graphic designer, your job is to make something, but you'll use a computer to make your design. So we use I work with and the object to say that you use this object to do your job. We also use I work with to talk about things you interact with during your job. So we often use interact with people, money, food, animals, and medicine. So people who jobs that interact with people are tour guides. Your job is to help people, but you interact with people to help them. A salesperson's job is to sell things, but they interact with, so I work with people, or I work. Jobs that where people work with money are bankers, business people, and cashiers. People that interact with food are chefs and waitresses. People who work with animals are vets and farmers. People who work with medicine are doctors and pharmacists. And so this is not something that they use, but something that they interact with in order when they're doing their job. So let's look at a job of a tour guide. What's your job? What do you do? Oh, well, a tour guide's job is usually clean and routine. They will, though the guests are different from day to day, they usually go to the same places and show the same locations in a city and have a routine that they do from day to day. A tourist guide job is usually safe. There's usually a very little danger for them as they go on their day-to-day routine. A tourist guide job is usually outside. They're not in an office. Maybe they sit and wait for tourists to come, but most of their job is going to museums or traveling around town. A tour guide usually works alone, so it's their job to be with the guests and show alone. A tour guide can work short hours or long hours, so sometimes it's a bit of both. Maybe one day it's 2 hours, next day it's 10 hours and they have to work, or maybe it's 24 hours and they're responsible for a full shift or a full view or a long weekend. A tour guide usually has special training. They have a lot of knowledge about what they're talking about, and they have to share that knowledge. A tour guide works with people, so they know how to keep the tour exciting, how to keep tourists happy, learn when tourists are getting bored and when to move on. So there's a lot of skills that come with people. And individual phrases that come with a tour guide. A tour guide helps tourists. A tour guide manages tourists, so their job is to keep a schedule and keep them happy. A tour guide translate languages, so maybe it's Chinese tourists, so a tour guide has to explain Thai and Chinese. And a tour guide shares information about places and people with tourists. So this is a bigger description about what a tour guide does than just, they show people. So using these phrases, you can use is, works, works with, has, and individual phrases to talk more intelligently about a job. So using these phrases, so I introduced the common phrases used to describe a job: is, has, works, works with, and shows examples of how these phrases are commonly used, so you can use them to more intelligently describe work, the work that you do and you're going to do. My name is Stephen Judge, and thank you for listening. Bye-bye.